let's go on to the next item, which is about Bill Maher.
Good Bill Maher or bad Bill Maher?
This is about the bad
It's only
Bill
bad
Maher.
Bill Maher.
This is about the bad Bill Maher.
I see him in a very schizophrenic kind of, multiple personality disorder light, where, he's human. He's got this good qualities, he's got bad qualities.
Yeah. Never been a big fan of his, but in any case.
I don't know that I really agree with that. I mean, I know where you're coming from, but I think... So let me back up a little bit and say what we're talking about, first of all. So
Steve, what are we talking about?
Who's Bill Maher?
Let me tell you what we're talking about. Yeah, Bill Maher...
Where am I? What is this, podcast?
Welcome to the Skeptics Guide.
Has been on... I guess his most famous show is Politically Incorrect, and he is a comedian who deals with political issues and social issues and has kind of an in-your-face reputation. He also is a very outspoken non-theist, I guess, or non-believer, although it's not really clear exactly what his metaphysical beliefs are. He certainly does not accept any major organized religion, and recently he produced the movie Religulous, which was very critical of organized religion. This has certainly endeared him to the atheist community. However, the flip side of Bill Maher is that, especially around issues of science and medicine, the guy's a hopeless crank and endorses astoundingly anti-scientific views, which leads to a lot of speculation and even consternation about, how do we reconcile these two things? And I think, people come to different conclusions about that. My sense has always been that the guy's an ideologue, and is not really a rationalist, and certainly not science friendly, in that he will take views that fit his ideology. And I think that when people like the views that he takes, then you can like him, and when you don't, then you say, well, how could he have those views? It's irrational, right?
And I mentioned another thing that endears him to skeptics is that when the 9/11 truthers had their heyday, he smacked them down without even blinking.
Yeah,
so,
he was absolutely against the 9/11 truthers.
Yeah.
But let's get to his stance on alternative medicine. This came up. He was in last week on his current show, Real Time with Bill Maher. The topic of alternative medicine came up. He was fielding a question, I guess, a write-in question. Someone asked, do you think that nationalizing healthcare in the United States would be good or bad for alternative medicine? And that prompted him to launch into one of his typical, rants, where he essentially said that, or one of the guests brought up the question of, say, prescribing Laetrile for cancer. Laetrile is a quack treatment that was proven to be ineffective back in the 1970s, but survived after that as essentially a fraudulent treatment, to lure cancer patients to clinics in Mexico and take their money before they die. So, but Maher, one point that he went off on was that it's illegal to practice or even talk about alternative medicine in the United States, which is just utter BS. It's just complete BS. His justification for that was that the pharmaceutical industry has its tendrils wrapped around the United States government to such a degree that it's the evil pharmaceutical industry that is making, even talking about alternative medicine, let alone trying to practice it, quote unquote, illegal. That's what he said. Utter BS. It's in fact frustratingly and often ridiculously difficult to keep cancer quacks from killing people with fraudulent therapies. We talked last week during our live show about Hulda Clark, who lived to a ripe old age selling her fraudulent therapies. We talked about the Gonzalez treatment, which has always been implausible and never really had any evidence to show that it worked, and now a recent study showed that, in fact, patients on the Gonzalez therapy did probably no better than for pancreatic cancer than being untreated, while the standard therapy group lived 3 times as long. And yet, been totally unable to shut him down. He's happily practicing his cancer quackery.
I wonder if Maher recognizes. Well, obviously he doesn't. But to me, it's interesting the irony that Maher so opposes religion, but doesn't see the parallels between fundamentalists who like to claim that it's illegal for students to have Bibles in school, that it's illegal for students to pray in school. these patently false claims that they use just to drum up sympathy. And it's the exact same sort of thing. Oh, it's illegal to talk about alternative medicine. No, it's not, actually.
Right. I mean, the only way I can reconcile those two things is that his anti-religion stance is not fundamentally based on rationalism. It's based upon something else. Because, as you say, the cognitive dissonance would just be too great. The hypocrisy is just astounding. It gets worse from there, because then he was challenged by saying, like, well, do you think that it should be illegal to prescribe Laetrile? And he said, well, I don't know if Laetrile works or not, which, again, BS, we know it doesn't work. But I know that the crap that Western medicine has been doing for the last 50 years doesn't work. We've done nothing to treat cancer.
Yeah, he's over the rainbow on this one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
He's really totally out of touch.
Yeah, I mean, we just spoke a few weeks ago. There was a science or fiction item. I mean, this data is out there looking at cancer survival over the last 50 years, which has been steadily increasing. It's been slowly, steadily improving. In fact, for the youngest age groups, the cancer deaths have decreased 25.9% per decade, and in the oldest groups, the people who do the worst with cancer deaths have been declining at 6.8% per decade. For some individual cancers, what was an almost automatic death sentence 50 years ago, we now almost always cure. There are some other cancers, like pancreatic cancer, for example, where we've made only incremental gains, and it's still, a very refractory, very severe illness. So again, cancer isn't one disease; it's a category of diseases. He kind of lumps it all together. But there's the data. The data is absolutely objective. Cancer survival is improving slowly and steadily with advances in science-based medicine. It's science and scientific medicine, which he denigrates as Western medicine, that has been steadily improving cancer rates. Meanwhile, he says he also claims that people go out of the country to get the illegal, cancer therapies, and even though they were given a death sentence, they come back alive. So
for about a month.
Yeah, let's hear about that. Yeah, where's the evidence that there's some clinics outside the United States have cured cancer and
also there's that same old argument about, the idea that doctors are out there handing out death sentences is so misleading, because we've discussed this in the past about how a doctor will not say, you have 2 weeks to live. Go, kiss your children. Yeah. It's more, this is what most people get from this disease. This is the likely window, but you might survive to this length. You might survive to this. It's a range. So when people get a quote-unquote death sentence, it's totally possible that they could outlive what most people
it's a curve.
What other people do. Yeah,
some people are going to be on the far end of the curve. Absolutely.
Right.
How about remission? Spontaneous remission.
Yeah. There's some cancers have a long tail, as we call it, and you could survive a lot longer than the median or the average. Absolutely.
Like Stephen Jay Gould, Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
His story.
I don't think Bill Maher is making this stuff up out of whole cloth. I actually think he's reading a lot of really bad blogs, articles, wherever he's getting his information from, and he's buying it whole cloth.
Yeah, it's just he's spouting the absolute worst of the worst anti-scientific, pro-alternative medicine propaganda. And there's no other way to characterize it. He finishes up by saying that the whole quote-unquote Western medical system is corrupt, that it only treats symptoms, and it does that because it's a scam that's designed to keep people sick.
Wow, Steve, we've been hearing this for decades, the same old stuff.
Right, so we don't which is it's just factually wrong. It's factually wrong that you somehow deliberately only treat symptoms. That's nonsense. Of course, we always go for a therapeutic effect rather than just a symptomatic effect whenever one is available. It's completely naive
and
of
this
what
guy
is actually happening.
This guy freaking won a science award.
Well, now you're bringing me to the final thing that I wanted to bring up, which is, and this is where the huge controversy comes in, is that the Atheist Alliance International is giving Bill Maher the Richard Dawkins Award. Now, if this were just an award for his movie Religulous, or if it was just for